Welcome to Click for IB Biology. This is the last of the videos in our sequence to do with cell signaling. We'll be looking at positive and negative feedback control mechanisms, examples that can be found. There's a blank PDF of this presentation that's linked in down in the description, and in the same place you're going to find 10 questions with answers that you can use to consolidate your understanding of this part of the course. So let's take a look at the concept of positive and negative feedback control when related to signal transduction. In the first example that we're going to look at of negative feedback regulation, the signal transduction is the combination of insulin, which is produced in response to high blood sugar levels, and of glucagon, another pancreatic hormone, in response to low blood sugar levels. Now, the function of these two hormones is in concert. They act to maintain the blood sugar level at a near constant level, which is between 3.9 and 5 millimoles per liter, 3.9 and 5 millimoles of glucose per liter of blood plasma. And this is the fixed point, which is characteristic of negative feedback systems. Now, feedback systems exist because of disturbances to the system. So for instance, in our graph here, this horizontal axis here represents the ideal fixed point regulation of blood sugar, of blood glucose sugar. However, we know that blood sugar levels do rise, and of course this may simply be because of feeding. So when one eats carbohydrates and sugars, your blood sugar levels with absorption are increased. Now, with this increase in blood sugar levels, the pancreas produces insulin from the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans, and the effect of insulin, as outlined in other videos in this particular playlist, the insulin brings the blood sugar levels down back towards the fixed point. Now, of course, when one doesn't eat, the glucose levels within the blood are reduced, and so we're now going to go beneath the fixed regulation point, and in response to this, we have the response from the alpha cells of the islets of Langerhans will produce glucagon. Now, glucagon is going to put glucose into the blood, whereas, of course, remember, insulin's taking the glucose out of the blood, and that could be from liver cells, muscle cells, or fat cells. And so these fluctuations in blood sugar levels are under the control, the balance between insulin and glucagon, and ideally the idea would be to regulate the changes due to environmental effects, such as feeding or not feeding, and where we can get the regulation to be as close to that fixed point as possible, then that would be ideal. But of course, there are examples of where our blood sugar levels go too high. That would be hyperglycemia. And if our blood sugar levels go very, very low, then we would have hypoglycemia. And both of these represent going beyond the tolerance limits of the insulin and the glucagon. And of course, under extreme conditions, these result in conditions such as diabetes. But that disease is for another type of study. So in negative feedback regulation, we have a fixed point, and although there are disturbances to the conditions, we try to control the conditions around that fixed point and blood sugar regulation would be an example. Of course, temperature regulation would be another one. And of course, we can see here the roles of these ligands of insulin and glucagon in signal transduction between the pancreas and liver and muscle cells, activating this regulation. Let's take a look at positive feedback. Now, unlike negative feedback maintaining a fixed set of conditions, positive feedback is involved in amplification. And so we would expect to see conditions becoming greatly enhanced in this positive feedback loop. And my chosen example is oxytocin, which is produced from the posterior lobe of the pituitary in the brain. There's the structure here, not to worry about that too much. And in this particular example, I would like to focus on the idea of the role of oxytocin in breastfeeding and the secretion of milk. And so here we have the time signal along the axis here, and here we have the blood oxytocin levels, and notice that the levels increase over time. So let's look at what's actually going on. So let's break into this cycle at this point here with the child suckling on the nipple in order to obtain milk for feeding. This nervous stimulation of the hypothalamus of the brain then connects through to the pituitary and the secretion of oxytocin, so an endocrine secretion. It's a very interesting example of where the nerve input to the brain results in a hormonal endocrine secretion. And this is explored in other parts of the syllabus, particularly the integration of body systems. Okay, so the child is suckling on the nipple. This nervous stimulation in the mother results in the secretion of oxytocin from her brain, and the hormone then goes to the breast tissues and produces more milk. Now, the success of the child's suckling and the increased milk production then satisfies the child, and they will suckle even more, resulting in further stimulation of the hypothalamus and further secretion of oxytocin. And so the concentrations of oxytocin increase, and of course with this increase in oxytocin is the increase in the production of the milk as well. The cycle is broken by the satiation of the child. The child has fed enough and their hunger dissipates. They will stop suckling, and the oxytocin levels will then of course come down following that process. So this is an example of positive feedback where there's an amplification. The levels of hormone have increased, but also the responding signal transduction of more milk production that also increases until the cycle is broken by the child stopping feeding. And so there's an example of positive feedback. And that concludes our study of cell signaling at the higher level. There are many connections to other parts of the syllabus. There's the chance to subscribe to the syllabus in the center there, to the channel in the center there. And there's just a summary playlist for you of all the videos in this part of the course.